and Aisha, if she can open.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this panel discussion that is dedicated to Africa's digital economy in the context of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Yusuf Mutamba, and I'll be a moderator for this panel discussion. Like any other continent, Africa has welcomed the promise of the digital economy, and more importantly, this is not only understood to be a choice anymore, but an imperative if the continent is to realize its full potential. And also, we need to realize that with the recent outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis, the need to transform Africa into a digital economy has become more pertinent, and we need to act towards this. Today with me on the panel, I'm joined by two speakers who have extensive knowledge and deep understanding of this subject. Without any further ado, allow me to briefly introduce our panelists who will share with us their thoughts and also moderate on how best we can transform into a more viable digital economy. So with me on the panel, I have Aisha Jeridi, who is a trainer with the African Union. And I'm also joined by Eric Kaigama, who is the founder of the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce and also the Quantum Blockchain. You're welcome. But before we dive into our conversation, before we dive into our conversation, I would also like to give you an opportunity to briefly tell us who you are and what you do. I'll start with you, Aisha.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to start first by just a small clarification. I'm not delegated by the EU to speak on its behalf. And I do not represent the EU in this because I'm not a staff of EU, though I am a trainer, certified trainer by EU in PRIDA project. I will talk more in details about the project and what is its relation with digital transformation in Africa. I am a member of the African Union African Internet Governance Forum, member of multi-advisory group. And I also represent the African Civil Society on Information Society, which is an NGO that represents the African Civil Society in United Nations body, ECOSOC, and works mainly on capacity building programs, on competition, e-mobile commerce competition. I am also the project manager of the ECMA, which is e-commerce mobile African awards, which is a project, it's a competition in cooperation of Access, in cooperation with the African Union, the United Nations, and multiple other stakeholders. That's in a nutshell what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, and you're welcome to the panel. Eric?
Okay.
Thank you, Yusuf, and thank you, Garage 48, and all the people involved, behind the scenes. And my name is Eric Kaigama, and I'm the founder of Quantum Blockchain Inc., and also the co-founder of Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce. I'm a business administrator. I'm a community Africa diaspora community advocate, and I'm also a blockchain concept architect as well. And in addition to being a father to a 7 and a 5-year-old in Jordan, Minnesota, USA. Thank you.
Thank you. So together with Eric and Aisha, today we are going to look at the current state of digitization in Africa, but also highlight some of the challenges that have been exposed by COVID. But more importantly, what I would require for our speakers is to look beyond COVID-19 and make recommendations that would be adopted by some of the actors on the continent in accelerating digital transformation. And I'll start right out with you, Aisha. When you look at the African Union digital transformation strategy, how does it relate to the current state of digitization in Africa?
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. I would start the answer by tackling the challenges, the most relevant challenges that even before COVID-19 were facing the African continent in general. And the first challenge would be the digital divide between different parts of Africa and different countries. We have a strong gap of digital divide. We have a strong population of unconnected still Africans who lack many things to be connected and to join the digitalization revolution. The second problem is, and of course, it is important to mention digital divide between the rural and urban is very, very important in the continent. And the African Union has devoted many projects to tackle that specific problem. I will talk in more details later on. The second problem that Africans may face is the lack of education and awareness, the lack of programs, and the lack of knowledge about the digitization and the transformation that is on now in the whole world, not only in Africa, which makes the African continent lag behind many countries leading the e-commerce field and trade and other relevant field. Not speaking about the health sector, which now after COVID-19 has shown that it really has immense problems to address and immense gaps to fill. So as the African Union, as I told you before, it has addressed these challenges by allocating specific programs. So when it comes to to the capacity building programs and the access to broadband. I previously told you that I am a certified EU trainer. I'm actually part of the PRIDA project. PRIDA stands for the Policy and Regulation Initiative for Digital Africa, which is a joint initiative of the African Union, the EU, and the International Communication Union that enables the African continent to reap the benefits of digitization by addressing various dimensions of broadband demand. And supply also. This project aims also to create or build a platform of capacity of EU member states and invite all multi-stakeholders in all states to join this in building their capacity in terms of knowledge in internet governance, in internet, broadband, technical, all the things that are needed, all the knowledge that is needed to join the digitization process on. So, as I said, the overall objective of the project is to foster universally accessible and affordable broadband in Africa, across the continent, of course. So, PRIDA project has until now reached, I think it's 9 countries that participated in building capacities, in also in participating in making national internet governance and regional internet governance school and internet governance forum. It's part also of the PRIDA projects is to boost, to improve, and to support these schools of internet governance and internet governance schools, in which people gather to talk, to discuss, and find solutions, and come out with recommendations to face the challenges, and to give to multi-stakeholders, to government, ESPs, internet service providers, private sector, civil society, academia, to tackle and to fight together the problems. I think I've covered all the aspects.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of problems, but what stood out and what I gathered is that there's a disconnect between the speed at which Africans are embracing ICT and other things like internet penetration. And I would like to come to you, Eric. Do you think investment in digital infrastructure would actually bridge this disconnect?
Thank you, Yusuf. And something we just recently got news. I think we were informed, I think, by the United Nations or one of the agencies. The globe has achieved 50%, internet penetration, which is an amazing thing. But I feel there's also, while that has been accomplished, there's a significant, tax ahead as well, to accomplish the next 50% that needs to happen. And we feel one of the strategic approach, that African leaders should be examining and should wholeheartedly adopt is an approach that we in the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce have adopted, which is to focus on rural Africa. There's not going to be a digitized economy if certain infrastructural needs, within rural Africa is not met. And now there's a significant part of the population resides in rural Africa. And what is going to happen if certain measures are not taken, certain interventions are not implemented? That means we're going to emerge out of the post-COVID with a widened, a gap between the haves and have-nots, digitally speaking. So essentially, what we've embarked on is to mobilize Africans, people of African descent within the diaspora, people that reside outside Africa, to basically aggregate our capacities and resource, optimize proximity to finance where we live, and come and leverage our expertise as well and reach out to stakeholders in the public sector in Africa and also the private sector to embark on this extraordinary post-COVID strategy to implement starting from rural Africa. A case in point is Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce is going to mobilize about $100 million as part of its ACFDC fund to basically finance what we call the rural industrial zones. Basically, what that is, it's a cooperative approach, able to go into communities to the hinterlands of Africa to systemize their processes, implement those macro solutions to accelerate their financial inclusion into the digital economy, while Africa is striving for that absolute digitization in a few years to come. So part of the strategy, what we're advocating basically is, as an organization, is to say enough of the excuses, especially now that what we've seen with COVID. One thing that COVID has exposed is our limitation as human beings, our limitation and also our extraordinary ingenuity.
Yeah.
And a case in point is what I've seen recently at the ongoing hackathon. But the PPP approach, which is the public sector and the private sector strategy or approach, is going to be what is effectively going to accelerate that, put in the required infrastructure on ground, and other complementary solutions as well. Thank you.
All right. And still on the issue of digital infrastructure, I'll come to you, Aisha. One of the key goals of the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy is to create infrastructure that is inclusive. And my question is, what does eco-rights mean when everything goes digital?
Okay, I would start first by answering your question related to digital structure. Actually, in addition to PRIDA, there is another project called PIDA. It is Policy Infrastructure Development of Africa project. This project aims to provide infrastructure to reconstruct fragile infrastructure in rural areas and in urban areas where infrastructure is not available for African continent. And this includes the broadband access. Of course, it has many branches and it includes broadband access. So talking about the, I'm sorry, can you just remind me of the question?
So my question was, what do eco-rights mean when everything goes online? In other words, what does it look like in terms of inclusivity if we say we want to transition into a digital economy? Can we actually try and quantify the aspect of inclusivity from the perspective of that Africa is entirely an informal sector, but now you are advocating for us to transition into something. And what I want to understand now, what does equal opportunity look like in terms of going digital?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This digitization process and equal rights, as you have mentioned, would mean, first of all, equal access to rural areas and to urban area, to broadband for rural areas and urban areas on an equal basis. That would mean first good infrastructure. It also would mean to connect the unconnected, to connect the great proportion of the African continent, of the African businessmen, SMEs, people who do not still use ICT to develop to make their business and to trade. It would also connect the universities and the students to the knowledge, to broadband. It would also mean to connect civil society and academia to the broadband and learn from each other, because we have, as I told you earlier, we have some sort of digital divide between the North and South, different parts of Africa, which means that and equal access to digitization would mean an experience sharing and expertise sharing also between the different population of the African continent. It would also mean the further development of the e-commerce into the continent. It is important to add that e-commerce is only 1% or 2% implementation in the African continent, though the African is full of potentials. Speaking about human potentials, and speaking also about the economic potentials. So we need to push further for access to digitization, access to equal access to digitization and equal access to broadband. It also would mean further work on the, as everyone knows that most of the broadband and the data is stored outside the African continent. So providing access would also mean that we will work on providing that all the data of the African continent is stored in the African continent. So that's also another aspect of digitization and development of digitization in the African continent. So that's roughly what I think it would mean.
All right, and Eric, I would want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think digital inclusivity is something that can be achieved, especially with the ongoing situation where we're trying to fight the COVID-19 crisis?
Thank you, and thanks Aisha as well. Thank you for sharing that, and also Yusuf for the question as well. I think absolutely digital inclusivity we can attain as attainable, but all hands has to be on deck. That means both the public sector and the private sector have to basically engage and also basically crafting our strategy and accelerated our strategy, that is to get it done. An Africa that we cannot afford is an Africa that's going to get out of post-COVID-19 and hasn't put its act together. This is a time of action and less of talk. And part of what we're doing to accelerate that, we know we have to complement. We don't expect government, to do it all, but part of it is also a call to the sons and daughters of Africa to put in. This is the time to put in your money in put in those investments, like in Africa in infrastructure.
Okay.
And that explains, why we're taking the ecosystemization approach. That means to complement what the likes of AU and also sovereign governments are doing. We want to go in there and put in, the resource and also the macro infrastructure and communities and have them have ownership. And I'm glad Aisha talked about data. We have, we're also working on a concept which is called the community data monetization. In addition, let's say an agrarian, most of the agrarian, communities in Africa, for instance, the data we're churning out, those are monetizable opportunities for them. The monies and funds that is generated from let's say the data monetization, the community data monetization, goes back to those communities into cultivation and expansion and scaling. And also additionally, that could be a means of communities also building significant wealth for the communities as well. And when people have the capacity to spend, you can bring in the telemedicines and all kinds of other technologies that could greatly improve their lives. A case in point is when the PPP, when COVID struck, we were absolutely, the world was in absolute disarray. If it wasn't for the fact that we have a technology, we could leverage an emerging technology, and the infrastructure in most developing nations would have been catastrophic. Case in point is when the dispatch, those interventions, were sent out. If there is no existing infrastructure to support such dispatch of funds to small business owners like myself, and also individuals that lost their jobs, the economy was hemorrhaging job at some outrageous, speed. So it was emergent technology, was digitization, it was the existing infrastructure that came to our rescue. We have identified our limitation, and now we know supremely what's going to help significantly as we move forward, as leveraging those technologies, especially the blockchain technology, the AIs in strategically in Africa. So absolutely, I think technology is what is going to help significantly in that in that detail, in that inclusivity that basically carries along, that factors in communities and other stakeholders as well. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, Eric. I think that is quite interesting. And I think Yannick joined us. Maybe I would like to take this opportunity to welcome him and maybe bring him to speed. We're basically looking at the current state of digitization in Africa and also highlighting some of the challenges that have been exposed by COVID. But more importantly, we also want to look beyond COVID and see two ways that we can use to accelerate digital transformation in Africa. And maybe just to start with you, Yannick, what have we learned about digitization as a result of COVID-19?
So what we learn about this situation is the importance of infrastructure here in Africa. I think for the past 10 years in different countries, there's different programs for investing into and if I talk particularly of the case of Gabon, we've been investing several millions in infrastructure to make sure that with this infrastructure in place, a new digital economy can be up and running. And after this COVID, we discovered the importance of this infrastructure when it comes to actually delivering the healthcare services, delivering the informations, the foods that the people need when they are affected by the fact that businesses have to be closed and the activity have to be stopped because of the COVID. So now, more than ever, the government realized that it's important for the people to have the infrastructure necessary to develop a digital economy, but it also is very important for them to develop what we call digital sovereignty. Because so far we've been able to cope with those situations, but we realize how often we have to rely on databases, on infrastructure that's actually owned by other countries, right? So now I think for the next 3 to 5 years, we have to invest in the human capital. We have to invest in the infrastructure to make sure that we have the minimum of sovereignty that will be able to give to the people what they need in time of crisis.
Okay, that is quite interesting. But how do you tie this to what is happening in Gabon?
So what we did in Gabon, since 2009, the government put a national program called Gabon Services. The main pillar of this strategy was to put in place a solid digital infrastructure. And in 10 years, what we were able to achieve is we divided by 10 the cost of access to internet. And we were able to get 78% of the country connected. Now Gabon is ranked among the most connected countries in Africa, number 6 by the ITU index, and number 1 in Central and West Africa. So now that's the cost of access has been reduced, and that we have access to internet almost everywhere in the country. Now the new challenge is what the World Bank call digital death. That's mean how we're making sure that now this digital power can actually impact the way people are living, the way people are working, the way people are getting health, and the way people are getting educated. And I think we've been successful in putting infrastructure. And for the past 2 years, my company, the Gabon National Digital Company, is working on making sure that we have the ecosystem of startups that's enough equipped to help in developing a national strategy to help government administrations and big corporations to digitalize their service relationship, to digitalize their product, and to be more efficient in the way they function.
Okay, that is also interesting. But let's take a moment, and this is a question that goes to all of us on the panel. I want us to think beyond COVID-19 and help us come up with recommendations that can be adopted by the different actors on the continent to help us accelerate digital transformation. And I'll start with Aisha. What are some of the key recommendations you'd put forward to help us drive this agenda forward?
Yeah, I think the African continent has a really strong potential, which is mainly youth and women. And I think the first solution, the first recommendation is to invest on these youth and on the power of youth to foster the digitization process in Africa. I would also say the African Union is doing great effort in that stance, and is cooperating in different initiatives to make Africans aware of the digitization process, and also to help them or encourage them participate in competition. Namely, I'm going to speak about the e-commerce mobile competition, which is an e-commerce mobile competition for young startups, SMEs who have ideas, innovative ideas. So we encourage them to present their ideas and to enter into e-commerce ecosystem and develop their business and integrate the digitization process. So the first point is to encourage youth and women to integrate digitization process and invest in their capacities, be there, make them trainers, make them powerful players in ecosystem. That's the first point. The second point would be, the second recommendation I see is to engage governments, especially because some of the governments do not put the digitization in the priority in their agenda. So the first thing I would ask them is to think about that and put it as a priority. Think about digitization as a vehicle for more and more development of the countries. Yeah, I know that poverty, a lot of other, especially after COVID, there is a lot of other priorities. But I think digitization is the solution for all problems. That's the second recommendation I would think of. The third recommendation, and I think it's the most important one, it has to do with developing and encouraging local African content, hosting. Working to make African content hosted in African boundaries. That would really empower African continent, African players, African stakeholders to manipulate the knowledge, to manipulate the strength that the African continent has. I would lastly think about developing specific programs. Actually, African Union has some programs, as I mentioned earlier, and projects dealing with infrastructure and capacity building. But I would also think that many states do not have awareness about these programs, are not aware of these programs, and they need to work more together and find ways to join the African Union in its project and facilitate its mission to implement the objectives and the goals that is working for, in order to end up with a digitized Africa. So that's roughly the 4 points and the 4 recommendations I can think of to foster digital transformation in Africa.
Thank you for those insightful remarks. Erica, what do you think we need to do to accelerate digital transformation on the continent?
Thank you. And this is the moment of the great reset. This is the moment for digital inclusivity, inclusive innovation, Anything that that is not inclusive of community stands, you know, a minimal chance of succeeding. So my call is to the African Union. I'm recommending. We have worked on several, you know, interventions. As we speak, Zimbabwe has 80% unemployment rate, which is
Okay.
I can't even describe. There's no word I think in the dictionary that can help me describe how outrageous that is. So we're sitting on interventions. We've crafted methodologies using emerging technologies, and the heart of it is a PPP, the public-private partnership. Both the fractional approach that we're using technology, emerging technology to deliver. We're calling on AU and other sovereign nations, the likes of President Christie, President Kagame of Rwanda. When I say we, some of us in the diaspora are Africans that live outside, you know, Africa. What we seek is partnership. We have, you know, the proximity to finance is what we have to our advantage. And we need to sit down and craft a strategy, an effective strategy of accessing and also deploying those funds into implementation of the infrastructure, starting with rural Africa, for instance. So we have intervention. First, look at the intervention we've crafted. The intervention, we're using the blockchain technology we've crafted. And secondly, is to look at the fractional PPP we've also crafted using the blockchain technology. And thirdly, a government, an inclusive governance, a government that we don't need government of highs. We need a government of help. Basically, what I'm saying is less of taking from people and more of putting into people infrastructures that will elevate people from their current situations. And thirdly, or my final point is it's absolutely having an inclusive government that also factors in people in the diaspora to be a significant part of it. And most importantly, I would say, you know, reconnecting with humanity. And the heart of it, with COVID has shown us our limitation. And this is the time for us to reconnect with humanity and get out of this COVID and beyond COVID to do extraordinary things as Africans and also some of our allies. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And I'll come to Yannick. Yannick, before you give us your recommendations, Eric mentioned something to do with the public-private partnerships. And this is something that has been highlighted in most of the panel discussions we've had. I'd want to know from your experience in Gabon, how has this channeled out in terms of drawing out government, private sector collaborations that are dedicated towards driving the digital economy?
In the case of Gabon, the company that I'm running, the Gabon Digital Company, SING, is actually a public-private partnership. What I mean is that after we've been investing in infrastructure, after the government has been investing in infrastructure, it actually required the private sector to put the starting capital necessary to start the company. So the company will drive the development of the digital economy with a private sector model. And it has been successful so far, because with this private sector model, we've been able to raise additional money to develop projects that doesn't rely only on government budgets, and that gives us also the freedom to actually try to target projects on different sector and even sometimes abroad when it's needed. So this is an example of what can be done when the private sector and the government is working together. But also in terms of infrastructure, for the past 10 years, most of the infrastructure that we've been putting together have been actually implemented by the private sector. When I take the case of the optic fiber in Gabon, it was actually a private public partnership between state-owned companies, and a French private company. And every 3 to 5 years, there was like a transfer of competencies between this private company to the state-owned company. And most of the work on the ground was implemented with a local company to go with the recommendation that Mrs. Jraida just did, and saying that the local content is also important. And once you want to actually reinforce the importance of the local companies in this strategy. So that's what we've been doing with the private sector. I don't know if I was clear enough.
Yeah, and based on that experience, what recommendations would you put forward to help the continent accelerate digital transformation?
So I would make five recommendations. The first one would be to develop a continental platform system. What I mean is that we need to have some type of interoperability between our system throughout the continent. That means if we want to work on education, if we want to work on healthcare, if we want to work on any type of other subjects, it would be interesting that our system throughout the different countries are interoperable, so we can tap on talent wherever in the continent to deal with a more continental issues. When you see what Amazon, what Google, what Zoom is capable of doing, is because they have really good platform that can tackle problems that exist in several countries. Right now, when we're dealing with education, for example, we'll deal with education only in Gabon and not what's going on in South Africa or what's going on in Morocco. And if we have a continental platform, we can actually see what are the requirements on those countries and how we can help to solve problems on those countries. So that would be my first recommendations, to build a platform system that have a continental level impact. The second one is to work on data, big data, right? So how can we, as a continent, how can we develop some type of open, I don't want to say open government, but open data infrastructure. Okay. So we can access data to different countries and see what are the common issues that we can face together. And for that, it would be really interesting to have some type of non-profit organizations that would have actually the purpose to take the data that you can find on this different country, make sure that those data are proper data, that are stocked, that the stockage of those data are made properly, and out of the data we can probably come up with some nice applications or some nice solutions for different countries. So open data organization for the continent will be interesting, and that will help us to deal with issues throughout the continent. The third recommendation would be on education. Here in Gabon, we have a school that's been created in the 60s called IAI. IAI is actually the African Institute of Information System. The idea back then in the 60s was to create a Pan-African school where all the talent from all the continents will come and get all the education in ICT, and then we'll go back to their own country to make sure that they can actually be a solution for the countries. Right now, these schools actually is not working that well because the different countries are not making regularly the contribution. But I think it's really important that on the continent we have our MIT. We need to have a really, really great school where people from all the continent come and get the best education that they can have in ICT, and then be useful in their own different country. The fourth recommendation would be open innovation. Right now in Gabon, for example, we're helping the healthcare minister to develop applications to facilitate the access to COVID testing and to make sure that people don't spend a lot of hours waiting for the testing. The health minister come to us because they were looking for a cheaper but very solid solution. And we've been able to deliver because they were able to work with startups That means young people that usually are not invited to the table when it comes to deal with issues. So I think this approach need to be taken even at the AU level. So now, when we're talking about problems in Africa, I think we need to have the people from the government, we need to have people from the private sector, we need to have people from the academy, but it would be interesting to also have those startup, what we call the startuppers, those young people who have new ideas and who can actually apply technology to solution. I would be really interesting to see how we can apply it to the continental level, doing a big open innovation type of event where like the one that we're organizing right now between you, the EU and AU, that can actually work on real problems. The last one would be the recommendation on connectivity. How we can make sure that we actually reduce the divide between people who are well connected and people who are not connected. I know, like a country like Gabon, we've been we did a good job in connecting the country. 78% of the country is connected, but there's still space. There's still spots in country where it's difficult to have access to internet. Sometimes because, for example, in Gabon is a forest country, and it's really difficult to put when there's a lot of trees, it's difficult for it to connect every part of the country. So by the fiber, of course. So now we have to look to new technology. Like the Li-Fi. I don't know if you heard about the technology where you can actually have people get access to internet through the lights. So I would be really interested to see what as a continent we can do to think about the new technology, new approach to get more and more people connected.
Thank you, Yannick. And those are very insightful recommendations. And right now, I would request each one of us to give a word of one or two to our participants who are actually putting together to see how best we can transition into a digital economy. And I'll start with you, Aisha. Eric,
Hello?
could you give us one or two? Hello,
Yeah.
Aisha.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
Eric. Go
Aisha.
ahead, Eric.
And quickly before we run, and I just want to add to what Yannick just said. The future of Africa lies on the decentralized system, which is basically decentralized educational system. That means if there's anything COVID has showed us is we don't have to converge in one space to learn things. So decentralization is in the heart of it. And we also want to to AU, we're working on a unified intervention mechanism. That means when things like COVID happens, the ability to dispatch intervention, financial interventions to citizens is very critical. So that is part of one of my recommendations to the AU and the rest of Africa. And to the participants in Hackathon, I've immersed myself in this, and I've seen the ideas and the extraordinary potential that lies on the continent. I think if there's anything that has happened is our leaders, and also the private sector players like Yannick and myself, able to invest even at a macro level. Africa, if you've had any interaction with any of the participants during the hackathon, the future is very as bright as it can be. But that investment has to happen. That means a collective effort of both the public sector, more of the public sector and less of government. The government just needs to provide the enabling environment for the private sectors to come in and do what they need to do. But I'm asking the people that are now participating in the hackathon, perseverance, and you're amazing. It might look a little bit challenging at every now and then, but just hang on, and the future is your limit, and hopefully able to bag some of those Garage 48 funds that they're dangling as well. Thank you for the opportunity, Yusuf and Garage 48. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Aisha?
Yes, thank you, Yusuf. I would end up by a positive note addressed to youth, African youth. I would encourage African youth, any African, who has an innovative idea to knock on doors and look for trainees, join internet governance forums, join internet governance schools, join competitions, hackathons, to build their business, to build themselves, and build, in fact, the future of Africa. Because it is, I noticed that there is a lack of knowledge, there is a lack of awareness, and we must fight this by our youth. This is the first point. So don't be afraid. We all started from the scratch, and we all learn in the process of life. The second thing is that I would like to urge governments, AU, and all stakeholders to work more closely about a threat that we did not discuss here, which is the cybersecurity and security in the African continent, which is a threat that impeded for a long time the development of the African continent and the development and the inclusion, in the digital inclusion in the continent too. So I would urge them to cooperate more. They're doing great efforts in that regard, but I would urge them more to engage and to have specific programs targeting that threat in order to enhance the inclusion, the digital African inclusion. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Yannick.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and for Garage 48. I would like to congratulate you. Back from Estonia and have an impact in all the continent like this is very interesting. A lot of young people from Gabon participating to the hackathon is actually heard from Estonia for the very first time, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the young people from Africa to get the opportunity to have the exposure to work on global issues. For a long time, people try to solve problems for us. People try to tell us what we need to do. And now, for the very first time, maybe in history, we have the same tools, and we have the same technology that will allow us to find the solution for us and for the world. And I would like to thank the UA. I would like to thank the European Union and also Garage 48 for this opportunity. Thank you again.
All right. Right now, we've come to the end of our discussion. And on behalf of Garage 48, allow me to take this pleasure to thank each one of you for sharing your thoughts and expertise. It's been a pleasure to host you, and have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll connect with Aisha and Yannick as well. Thank you, Yusuf.
Yeah, of course. It will be a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Garage 48. Yes. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.